mother, a cook, who else? Someone who eats food. You probably have heard of Dr. Lustig. He was introduced on the poster or the promotion that you may have seen, so I do not want to take up too much of his time. I will, however, highlight a few reasons why we thought he would be the best speaker to spark off a conversation about real food in our community. Robert H. Lustig, MD, M.S.L, is the Emeritus Professor of Pediatrics at the Division of Endocrinology and member of the Institute for Health Policy Studies at UCSF. He is also the Chief Science Officer on the Board of Directors of Eat Real, an organization that is working to solve urgent and significant challenges associated with diet-related disease. So at this point, I just wanted to say that obviously Dr. Lustig's resume and biography was so long that I only picked on 3 or 4 things that I thought would be relevant to our talk today. Everything else forms the backdrop of who he is and his knowledge that he brings to us. Dr. Lustig came to public attention in 2009 when one of his medical lectures, Sugar, the Bitter Truth, went viral on YouTube. He's the editor of Obesity Before Birth. Is that right? Obesity Before Birth. Maternal and Prenatal Influences on the Offspring, 2010. And author of Fat Chance, Beating the Odds Against Sugar, Processed Food, Obesity and Disease in 2013. So without further ado, we'll see what Dr. Lustig has to say to our community, and I'm hoping that this conversation will lead us to acts of advocacy so we can find better real food in our schools and even in the restaurants in Palo Alto.
David, where's that microphone? Oh. Thank you. All right, there we go. Thank you. I have laryngitis. I've had this thing for 2 weeks. That cold that everybody's got, it knocked me out for 6 days. I was flat on my back, and this is what it left me with. So I feel fine, but I'm still not up to par, and I apologize, but it is what it is. Anyway, you are here because you are food lovers. Well, I am too. Problem is, our kids are not. They're faux food lovers, they're processed food lovers. And unfortunately, when you get to high school, you kind of lose control of it, don't you? And we're seeing an enormous amount of adult diseases being visited on children. We're seeing the diseases of alcohol being visited on children, type 2 diabetes and fatty liver disease. These are diseases we never saw before in children. And it is all coming from the processed food environment. The problem is, processed food is cheap. And so it's convenient, it's everywhere, it tastes good, it's cool, it's advertised and marketed heavily. If you didn't know, only 19 cents of every dollar you spend on processed food actually goes to the food. 81% of it goes into either profit or marketing. So the food actually costs 1/5 of what they sell it for. Think about it the next time you buy a box of breakfast cereal. So this is a huge problem because while people are very concerned about malnutrition and what it's like to have no food, and I'm not suggesting no food is good, but the question we have to ask ourselves is, which is worse, no food or bad food? And that is a topic that I just addressed with the Director General of the World Health Organization, Food and Agriculture Organization, just 2 weeks ago. He did not have an answer for me. So this is a huge problem, and it's a problem at every level, and we know it. We have to solve it. But you can't solve it if you don't know what the problem is. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And we're going to talk about ways that perhaps you, in the Palo Alto School District, can actually help solve it. Okay, so I do have some disclosures. I did write these 2 books for the public, and I am the chief science officer of a nonprofit called Eat Real, and I'll show you what we do in a moment and at the end. And also, I am the chief medical officer of a for-profit startup called Biolumin Technologies, where we're trying to develop a bioengineered answer to this problem. We are not going to talk about that tonight. I'm not hawking anything tonight. So I want you to think for the moment that these last 50 years that we have experienced together as a society, that you have been guinea pigs in a grand experiment that you did not give informed consent to, because you weren't informed. However, you did give consent, just not informed consent. And the study, this grand experiment, had 10 principal investigators. I will name them in a moment. But the hypothesis of the experiment was the following: processed food is better than real food. Now, if this were a grand experiment, the way you would determine whether the experiment was a success or a failure is based on the outcomes. So here are the outcomes that one would look at to answer this question: if processed food is better than real food. Consumption, health, environment, and finally cash flow. And cash flow has 3 parts: companies, consumers, and society. Everybody ready? We're going to answer each one of these over the course of the next 40 minutes. So here's how the experiment started. And I don't know about you, but I ate a lot of those Swanson TV dinners growing up. Can you hear me all? Okay. Good. And of course, this is what it looks like today. All you have to do is walk down, the aisle at Safeway to see it. And here are your 10 principal investigators. All these guys here in the middle. And you've heard of all of them. In fact, they control 90% of all of the food in the world. Not just this country, but in the world. Pretty amazing. Now, we have to define our terms. It's part of science. So, what is processed food? Well, it has to be mass-produced. It has to be consistent batch to batch. It has to be consistent country to country, so that everyone gets the same taste experience no matter where you are. Specialized ingredients from specialized companies. Virtually all of the macronutrients, the protein, the fat, and the carbohydrate, have to be pre-frozen, otherwise they will go rancid. So that also means the fiber has to be removed in order to be able to accomplish that. It has to stay emulsified. So emulsifiers bind fat and water together so that when you put the lasagna in the microwave, it doesn't separate out when it gets hot. And it has to have a very long shelf life or freezer life to decrease depreciation. This is the definition of fast food from a food engineering standpoint. Now we're going to define it from a nutritional standpoint. Fast food is 3 things too little and 8 things too much. Too little: fiber. By the way, this was written by Stanford professor Rosen Street, Justin Sonnenberg. Too little omega-3 fatty acids, which are heart-healthy, anti-inflammatory, anti-Alzheimer's, save your life. Too few micronutrients, flavonoids, polyphenols, etc., things that you find in the wheat germ rather than the wheat, like the whole wheat. It's already been stripped out because the germ goes rancid, so it's the way to keep bread on the shelf longer. And 8 things too much trans fats. We know trans fats are bad, and they are now coming out of the food, and that's good, because they are the devil incarnate. They are consumable poison. And we knew it back in 1988, but it took 25 years for the FDA to finally do something about it. Branched chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. These are 3 essential amino acids. You have to consume them. It's not like you can't consume them, you have to consume them. They are 20% of muscle. Now, bodybuilders are building muscle. They need more branched chain amino acids, so that's why they take protein powder. That's why they make these protein powder shakes. The question is, what happens if you're not a bodybuilder? What if you're a mere mortal like me and you're taking in excess branched chain amino acids? Turns out the excess goes to the liver takes the amino group off, increases the amount of organic acids, floods your mitochondria. Mitochondria can't handle the load, and all the excess gets turned into liver fat and causes insulin resistance and chronic disease. Omega-6 fatty acids, which are pro-inflammatory, they're the precursor to arachidonic acid, which is the primary inflammatory molecule. Food additives of various sorts, red dye, this food dye, yellow dye, that. Emulsifiers, I mentioned before. So what are emulsifiers? Well, they're detergents. That's what's in Tide, emulsifiers. That's why they can lift the stain out, is because they end up dissolving the fat into the water. So what happens if you swallow a detergent? Anyone? The detergent eats the mucin layer off your intestinal epithelial cells, and so the bacteria in your intestine can now approximate your epithelial cells and cause leaky gut and autoimmune disease. Salt. So we all consume about triple the amount of salt we need. Now, most of us can get rid of it, but about 15 to 20% of us can't. We are salt sensitive and our blood pressure goes up. And for every 2 millimeters of mercury, your blood pressure goes up, your risk for stroke goes up 10%. Nitrates, so that's what, it's in processed meat. So like bacon and sausage, okay, nitrates. Turns out nitrates get converted to nitrosoureas in your colon and cause colon cancer. So they are now off the breasts. And finally, my favorite, the one I've done most of my research on, sugar. Why is sugar so bad? Well, we're going to get it. So, of the 600,000 food items in the American grocery store, 74% of them are spiked with added sugar, on purpose, for the food industry's purpose, not for yours, because it works for them, for several reasons. Number one, it's a food preservation mechanism. It's a humectant, holds on to water. Okay? It causes bread to be springier because it holds on to water for longer. That's why grocery bread doesn't stale for 3 weeks. And of course, it's addictive. And we've got the data on that to show the more they add, the more you buy. And we also have the economic data to show that because it's addictive, when the price goes up, consumption does not go down. That's the sign of something that's addictive, hedonic. However, on the salt side, because people think salt is the big issue, 4,000 packaged items in the Emeritus food supply, only 50% of them greater than the recommendation for added salt. So it turns out sugar is the marker for processed food. So wherever you see sugar on the label, it's been processed. That's what you need to know. The problem is there are 56 names for sugar, so you may not know. And that's on purpose, because the food industry hides behind those 56 names, so they don't have to tell you what they did. All right, so let's now discuss the outcome variables in order. So, consumption. Now, over here, in 1957, we have the advent of the original fast food burger, White Castle. 1957, 210 calories. Over here we have Bob's Big Boy from today at 618 calories. And of course, in the midst of the obesity epidemic, Hardee's had the temerity to offer us the thick burger at 1,420 calories. And of course, you can go down the street and to Carl's Jr. and get the $6 burger, which has 2,000 calories. So that's the entire caloric allotment for an entire day in one hamburger. So you say, well, QED, end of discussion. That's the reason, right? More calories, more obesity. It's a little more complicated than that. So it is true we are all eating more. I don't argue that. Adult American men, 187 calories per day more than 25 years ago. Adult American women, 335 calories per day more than 25 years ago. And in this slide, teen boys, 275 calories more than 25 years ago. We are all eating more, no argument. Absolutely true. The question is, what are we eating more of? Is it the fat? No, not the fat. Only 5 grams, 45 calories. If you look at the change in the trends in specific foods over that period of time, look at this. Whole milk way down, red meat down a little, fat's about the same, cheese up. Basically, it's a wash. And that's what the data show, it's a wash. So we're not eating more fat. Well, in fact, as the percent calories from fat have gone from 40 to 30%, obesity and metabolic syndrome has gone through the roof. It's actually carbohydrate that we're eating more of, and refined carbohydrate. So 228 calories. And if you look down here at the bottom, you'll notice that's all the carbohydrate there. And specifically, of course, beverages. Now, consumption of sugared beverages has gone down on the coasts, not in the middle of the country. And what is that stuff? Well, high fructose corn syrup, right? The most demonized food additive known to man. 63 pounds per year. But when you look at the data, the only users are in the US, Canada, Japan, and very limited exposure in parts of Europe. Yet, Australia's got as much diabetes as we do. China has as much diabetes, and they have more diabetes than we do. We have 9.4% diabetes rate. They have an 11% diabetes rate. Okay? And they're not fat. But they're drinking regular soda, not high fructose corn syrup soda. So what is the difference? Well, high fructose corn syrup is made up of two molecules. Over here, we have a molecule called glucose. You've heard of it. Your serum glucose, right? This is the molecule here. It's a 6-membered ring. That becomes important in a moment. Here is this other molecule, fructose. Now, fructose is a 5-membered ring. You will notice they are not the same. Now, high fructose corn syrup is one glucose and one fructose not bound together. Free. Here's sucrose, table sugar, cane sugar, beet sugar, the stuff you put in your coffee, the white crystals. One glucose, one fructose, O-glycosidic linkage linking the two. The enzymes in your intestine cleave this in about a nanosecond. Basically freeze these from each other, you absorb the two molecules, it's a wash, they're the same. There's no difference between the two, and that's what all the data show. There's no difference between the two. They're both equally bad. The question is, why does this happen? And what's going on with these molecules? So glucose, like I said, serum glucose, right? What diabetics measure when they prick their finger? So glucose is the energy of life. Every cell on the planet burns glucose for energy. Glucose is so important that if you don't consume it, your body makes it. So, the Eskimos, the Inuit, they don't have any carbohydrate in their diet. They don't have any place to grow a carbohydrate. They got ice. They got whale blubber. But they have a serum glucose level because glucose is so important that their liver turns the whale blubber into a serum glucose for them. So glucose is essential to life, but eating glucose is not essential to life. Now, the food industry will tell you, well, you need glucose to live. Do you see the marketing problem with that statement? Well, you do need glucose to live. You need blood glucose to live. You don't need dietary glucose to live. So they do this on purpose. They do the same thing with body fat and dietary fat. They confuse the two to make you think that fat makes you fat, so they can sell more carbohydrate. Now this molecule over here, fructose, this 5-membered ring, this is a whole different ballgame. Because there is no biochemical reaction in any eukaryotic cell, in any animal cell on the planet that requires dietary fructose. It is completely vestigial for animal life. It is a storage form of energy for plants. That's why it's fruit sugar, because plants make it. And that's why they're plants, not animals. The point is, nobody needs it, but it tastes really good. It's actually plants' ways of getting humans and animals to spread their seeds. It's an evolutionary trick, because the deer eat the berries, and the seeds go out in the stool, and they make more berry bushes all over. Otherwise, how could fruit trees or fruit bushes propagate? So there's a reason why sugar is sweet, but it's not necessarily for us. it's for them. Everybody got that? So it turns out this is the metabolic problem molecule, because this is metabolized completely different from this in the liver. They bear no relation to each other. And this one is the one that overwhelms your mitochondria, ends up causing liver fat, and drives chronic metabolic disease, just like alcohol, because fructose and alcohol are metabolized virtually identically. And it makes sense that that would be the case, because after all, where do you get alcohol from? Fermentation of fructose. It's called wine. Right? We do it in Napa, Sonoma, Santa Cruz every day. That's why sugar turns to alcohol, because the yeast does the first step of the process, called glycolysis. For fructose, we do our own first step. But after that, the mitochondria don't care where it came from. And if you overwhelm those mitochondria, you're going to get fat. So you can have alcoholic fatty liver disease, or you can have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Alcoholics get the first kind, teenagers get the second kind. And they get the same diseases for the same reasons, and that's why they get type 2 diabetes, and that's why everybody is now sick. And that's why every healthcare system in the world is going broke, taking care of diabetes and fatty liver. So this is what's happened to our sugar consumption. Our ancestors, getting fruits and vegetables out of the ground with the occasional honey, consumed about 4 pounds of sugar per year. And here you see the growth of the sugar industry in the 1800s. C&H, Domino, Texas, Louisiana, Hawaii. Okay, we reached a stabilization point here where price equaled demand. Here's the rationing of World War II right here. I came back up to the same place right here. And then the advent of processed food, which started this going up. And then the substitution of high fructose corn syrup for sucrose because it was cheaper and it was local. And of course then the dietary guidelines in 1977, which said eat less fat. Well, when you take the fat out of food, what happens? It tastes like cardboard. Food industry had to do something. What did they do? They added sugar. And so our consumption boosted yet again. So a 25-fold increase in one item, in one nutrient. The question is, does that have effects? The answer is, oh yeah, you bet it does. So let's talk about those effects. Let's talk about the health and disease part of the outcomes. So here we have an article from the New England Journal of Medicine looking at preventable causes of death. You'll notice smoking, down. Blood pressure, down. Cholesterol, down. Physical activity, up. We should be reaping a health benefit. All those things should be making us healthier, but we're not. We have a health deficit because obesity is up and diabetes is through the friggin' roof. So, this study was written up in 2001, and it looked at diabetes rates all over the world. And at that time, the diabetes rate in 2000 was 151 million people on the planet. And the projection from this study was that by 2010, so 10 years, we would have gone from 151 to 221 million. Now, if you do the annualized inflation rate, that's a 3.88% per year increase. Everybody understand how that I got from one number to the other? But we didn't see 221. What we actually saw was 285 million. When you do the math on that, that's a 6.55% annualized inflation rate. A doubling of the rate, not a doubling of the people, but doubling of the rate, which is worse. Doubling of the velocity of this. And by 2014, 422 million. And that's an annualized inflation rate of 10.3%. And this is in the middle of trying to do something about it. Things are getting worse faster. WTF? Something's wrong. Okay, this is not okay. This isn't just going up at some, ridiculously slow rate. This is going up in a parabolic rate. So we must be driving it. The question is, how are we driving it? So if you look at cardiovascular mortality, in other words, dying of a heart attack, this is a study that was published in 2014. This here is a histogram of the percent of calories consumed as added sugar for the US adult population over a 20-year period. The median of this histogram is at 18%. So that means half of the US population consumes more than 18% of its calories as added sugar, half less. That's a big number, 18%. Now this red line through the middle is the adjusted hazard risk ratio of dying of a heart attack for those same people. And you'll notice that the inflection point is here at 15%. So what's that saying? It's saying that more than half the US population has an increased risk of dying of a heart attack because of their added sugar consumption. And if you happen to be out here in the 30 to 32% range, which is what our teenagers are doing, the hazard risk ratio is 4. 4 times more likely of dying of a heart attack because of your added sugar consumption because you are a teenager. And we are now starting to see those kids from 1988 who are now old enough to be dying of the heart attacks, and they're starting to mount. This is looking at diabetes. This is from Europe. And they're looking at sugar-sweetened beverages, sodas. Do sodas cause diabetes? Well, they couldn't prove causation, but they did the next best thing. They did prospective correlation. What they did was they adjusted the model over the course of several years, and they adjusted for energy intake, EI, that's obesity, for calories, and BMI, that's obesity. They adjusted for those two things. And they showed that every sugar beverage consumed per day increases your risk of developing diabetes by 29%. And we don't consume 1 sugar beverage per day in this country, we consume 2.5. So take that number up to 68%. So our average sugar consumption increases our risk by 68%. This is a meta-analysis looking at sugar beverages and fruit juice separated out. Because everyone says fruit juice is healthy, right? Take a pill. Notice, adjusted for adiposity, adjusted for calories too, the hazard risk ratio, the 95% confidence interval does not cross 1, meaning it's statistically significant. And that's true for sugar beverages, and it's also true for fruit juice as well. So fruit juice is not fruit, because fruit has fiber. Fruit juice does not. And it's the fiber that's the good part of the fruit. The juice is nature's way of getting you to eat your fiber, because fiber has health benefits all by itself. Because fiber is the food for your bacteria, for your microbiome. That's what they chew on. And if you don't give them what they need to chew on, guess what they decide to chew on? You. Your gut. And they've shown that that also decreases the mucin layer. It's a study that we did. My dietitian and grad student, Luis Rodriguez, looked at the NHANES database for 3 cycles and looked at the adolescents and looked at the odds risk ratio for metabolic syndrome based on added sugar consumption. So this is the reference quintile, the first quintile, so the bottom 20%. And so we set that reference at 1. So that was the risk. As the sugar went up, so did the risk for metabolic syndrome. It's up to 10-fold. And that's adjusted for calories and obesity. We did a study looking at the Food and Agriculture Organization statistics database for the whole world. We asked the question, what about the world's diet predicts diabetes rate change, country by country, year by year, over a 10-year period? And the answer was only sugar. Only sugar. Only changes in sugar availability predicted changes in diabetes prevalence. Every extra 150 calories consumed per day, per country, per year only increased the diabetes prevalence by a total of 0.1%. Nothing. But if those 150 calories happen to be a can of soda instead, diabetes prevalence went up 11-fold, 1.1%. And again, we're not consuming 1 sugar beverage per day, we're consuming 2.5. So take that up to 2.4%. Given that our current diabetes prevalence is 9.4%, that means that 29% of all the diabetes in this country is explained by sugar and sugar alone. Nothing else. These data actually meet the medical criteria for causal inference. So who here believes in climate change? Why? Got a control group? Anybody do any randomized control studies on that? Who here believes tobacco causes lung cancer? Why? Got a control group? Who here believes that football trauma causes chronic traumatic encephalopathy? Got a control group? Who here believes that asbestos causes mesothelioma? For that one, we can actually see the asbestos threads in the middle of the tumor. We got that one. That's it. All the others, causal medical inference. Because you'll never get a controlled study. It would be unethical, immoral, you would end up in jail. So we will never have the study on does sugar cause these events. But we have causal inference because we've shown dose, higher dose, more diabetes. We've shown duration, longer sugar exposure, more diabetes. We've shown directionality. Those countries where sugar went up, more diabetes. Those countries where sugar went down, and there were 10 of them, less diabetes over the decade. And finally, most important for causation, you have to show precedence. Something has to precede something else to be causative in time, right? Can't follow it. If it's volatile, it's not causative, right? 3 years. Whenever sugar changed in one country, diabetes changed in the same direction 3 years later. 3 years. And we've done it now twice in 2 different data sets, looking backwards and forwards and got the exact same answer. 3 years. Kind of cool. So we know that sugar's the bad guy in this story. And now we have the causative proof, because we have published these 3 studies, and we're about to publish the 4th, that shows why sugar does this. So I'm going to take a lot of data and then compress it to one set of slides. This is a fatty liver, and it makes lots of triglyceride, and it makes lots of these very low density lipoproteins. That's serum triglyceride. That's what causes heart disease. We took 43 kids, and we took the sugar, added sugar out of their diet, and we substituted it with starch, so that there was no change in calories. Everything else was the same. Fat was the same, protein was the same, fiber was the same. Total carbohydrate was the same. But sugar came out and starch went in. So, in the vernacular. Yeah, well, so we took the pastries out, we put the bagels in. We took the sweetened yogurt out, we put the baked potato chips in. We took the chicken teriyaki out, we put the turkey hot dogs in. Got it? So we didn't give them good food. We gave them crappy food. We gave them processed food. We gave them kid food. Food kids would eat. We gave them a scale. And every day, we called them up on the phone. Say, what'd you weigh? And if they were losing weight, we told them, eat more, in order to keep their weight constant over the course of a 10-day period. And then we studied them again. The liver fat went down 22%. Their rate of liver fat production, called de novo lipogenesis, got cut in half. The VLDL went down by 46%, and their insulin kinetics all reverted to normal. We reversed their metabolic syndrome without changing calories and without changing weight, just by getting rid of the sugar. We didn't even give them good food. We gave them fiberless food, and they still got better. Yeah.
Sorry, so it was 9 days.
9 days.
What was that? Was that a number? Was it not like 10 days or 15? I don't understand why 9 days.
Well, because we gave them 3 days worth of food in a big cooler. And then they brought the cooler back and we filled it again. And then they brought the cooler back and we filled it again. And then we studied it again. So that's one. Day 0, day 10. 9 days of food in the middle. Yeah.
No natural sugar, no fruits?
Fruit, we gave him fruit.
They have.
That was it. That was all. That was the only source of sugar. And by the way, this wasn't funky food. Okay? This was Safeway food. Okay? It was just chosen to be no added sugar food. You know that there are certain items, you know, next to the sugar-containing ones that say no added sugar. So we chose those. Yeah.
Did you give them the high sugar diet too, or was that just their?
That was their baseline diet.
Okay.
They were all consuming greater than 50 grams a day. Yeah, that was their baseline diet. Great, all of them are greater than 50 grams. That we chose them to be high sugar consumers.
And
Yeah.
all of this food was non-processed food?
Sorry?
Non-processed food then?
No, it was all processed food.
What was processed
It
food?
was processed food. It was all crappy food.
But
kid
no
food.
added sugar.
Huh? Just no added sugar food. Okay? So we know sugar's the bad guy in the story. So we have the data now that proves, we have proof, okay? Read my lips, proof of sugar and 4 diseases, 4. Diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver disease, and tooth decay. We have indirect data, not association data, not causative data yet. We're working on it for cancer and dementia too. It's looking promising, but I can't say that yet. But it's looking good. Okay, so health and disease. Now, the environment. What does processed food do to the environment? Well, this is from the World Wildlife Federation, and it shows soil erosion of various sorts. Take a look at this. This is Lake Okeechobee in the Everglades, right there. And wherever you see orange, yellow, or green, that's a sugar plantation. And that's the phosphate runoff, which is killing the vegetation. In fact, with the hurricane that went through there in 2015, Governor Rick Scott had to open the locks, and that killed all the vegetation, the entire side, the entire Gulf of Mexico side of Florida, because of the phosphate runoff. That's what it's doing to the environment. This is Minnesota, from the Depression till recent time. And you'll notice all the different kinds of crops they used to grow in Minnesota. See the different kinds? But you'll notice over time, it all became corn and soy, and then with biotech, it even more so. The point is, the corn is for high fructose corn syrup. It's not for corn eating. It's for cow grazing and corn eating, and for HFCS. So here you see the corn planting in 2007 around the country. Here's the atrazine use, the pesticide, to prevent the locusts from eating the corn. Here's the nitrate contamination in the Missouri Valley. And my favorite is this one here. This is the ratio of government payments to farm gross income. What do you see? You see a big black hole. So, what is the dirtiest 4-letter word in the English language? Iowa. Not corn, Iowa. Because it's the first presidential caucus. And no one wants to piss off Iowa. So the sugar subsidies and the corn subsidies continue because it's good for corn. It's not good for us. And when you do monoculture, which is what we're doing, because all the corn's in Iowa, all the soybeans are in Iowa, you have to spray them. And you have to spray them with, pesticides. So that gives rise to super weeds. You can see all the different pesticides, and you can see the use over time. And finally now, the last one, cash flow. So let's start with companies. So this is what's happened to your food as we speak. 1982 to 2012, so 30 years of food consumption in America. Notice, meats down 10% because we were all told to go low fat. Fruits and vegetables exactly the same. No change. Now, we're always told we don't eat enough fruits and vegetables, and that is true, we don't. But we never did. Ain't new. But we didn't have this problem in 1982, but we sure as hell have it now. Because it's not about the fruits and the vegetables. Grains and baked goods, up 1%, and that's important because glucose means insulin, insulin means weight gain means obesity. So that's part of the obesity equation, no argument, I don't argue that, that's true. Dairy products, down 2.5%. Turns out dairy is protective against both heart disease and diabetes. Protective. Because the saturated fat in dairy is different from the saturated fat in meat. Not the same. Odd chain fatty acids with a specific phospholipid signature that has been shown to be protective against heart disease and diabetes. So as the dairy has gone down, heart disease and diabetes has gone up. And finally, processed foods and sweets, doubling. There's the real issue. That's what's happened. And this is the S&P 500 from 2007 to 2011. Here's the economic downturn of 2008, the recession. And you'll notice, here's the S&P right here. And you'll notice, McDonald's, Coke, and Pepsi wrote it out pretty nicely, in fact, did very well. In fact, if you look at all the recessions, the food industry does better. Because this is the reward people still can afford. In essence, it's food insecurity writ large. And here's Hormel, ADM, General Mills, Conagra, Procter & Gamble, Kraft, all doing better than the S&P. You want to make money, invest in a food company. Because they have the magic formula, because they know where to put the sugar to make you buy more. Now, since the data has started to come out, since our work and other people's work have started to finger sugar, you know what, all of a sudden, big sugar is not doing so hot. So you'll notice this is from 2012 to 2014, and here's the S&P, and here's Tate & Lyle, Lenovo, and Suzuki. All of a sudden, for the first time in their careers, not doing so hot. How about that? And here's Coke, McDonald's, Pepsi, and Dr. Pepper, Snapple, doing less well than the S&P. So, in fact, they are not immune, because people are now voting with their forks. So what about for consumers? So over here we have the change in food prices per 1,000 calories in the UK for a decade. So here are the different kinds of foods. Well, let's just show you on this side. Healthy food, not healthy food. Real food, processed food. Now you'll notice real food was double the price, indeed. And the real food went up faster, 17 pence per pound per year, as opposed to processed food, which only went up 7 pence per pound per year. So real food went up more than double as fast. So the price was double, and the rate of increase was more than double. So this is not good. And of course, that's why people buy down here. I understand that. It's an economic issue. If you look at the whole world, here's us, the US. This is percent of GDP spent on food. Now normally, most countries spend between 15 and 20% of GDP on food, routinely over the millennia. That's sort of the benchmark, 15 to 20. We're down to 7. UK's down to 9. Australia's down to 11. And we are the 3 fattest nations. But you'll also notice that the countries in purple are at 36% or more of GDP spent on food, and they've all had a revolution in the last 8 years. Fluctuating food prices cause political unrest. People want cheap food. I understand. And the way to make it cheap is to process it, to put the sugar in and take the fiber out. The problem is that makes the food toxic and addictive. So that's the choice. What do you want more? Your wallet or your health? That's your choice. The problem is, you can't make that choice if you don't understand your choice. But that's the choice. So if you look here, here's costs for hospitals, physicians, and pharma continuing to go up, but they don't meet the actual total cost of medicine because the rest is going to the care and treatment of chronic metabolic disease, like diabetes. So it's costing you anyway, just in a different way, and it's actually costing you more. And finally, society. So Here's that same graph I showed you before. Here's processed food in 1965. Excuse me. Now I'm going to superimpose on this graph another graph showing the percent of GDP spent on healthcare in the same period of time. Everybody ready? What do you see? When processed food entered our world, that's when healthcare costs started to go haywire. And for very good reasons. And we understand what those reasons are now. Processed food is the driver through all these reasons I've just shown you. Now, let's do the math real quick. Back of envelope calculation. The US food industry grosses $1.46 trillion per year. Of that, $657 billion is gross profit. That's a gross profit margin of 45%. 45% gross profit margin. Remember what I told you? Of every dollar you spend on processed food, only 19% of it is for the food, the rest is for profit and marketing. There it is. But healthcare costs in the United States cost $3.5 trillion. Now of that, 75% is chronic metabolic disease, the diseases I told you about at the bottom, at the beginning. And of that, 75% could be prevented if we could go back to rates of 1970, before this disaster started occurring. So all of that's preventable if we fixed our diet. Now if you do 75% of 75% of 3.5 trillion, you get $1.9 trillion a year going down a rat hole. What do you think we could do with $1.9 trillion a year? Think we could solve healthcare? Think we could solve the budget? Think we could solve the debt? The national debt? I mean, we could solve everything. And make everybody healthier in the process. We lose triple what the food industry makes. That is unsustainable. You cannot keep doing that. And that is why we are now in the hole we are in. And the people who are the sickest are the people who are the ones who refuse to change. Unsustainable will be why Medicare will be broke by the year 2026. Now I'm going to be 72 in the year 2026, and I want my friggin' Medicare. I worked hard for it. Presumably you worked hard for it. It won't be there for you. You okay with that? So here's Social Security. So you know that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, right? You know, the only difference between Social Security and Bernie Madoff is that with Bernie Madoff, if you got out early enough, you saw some money. Okay? So all the young, healthy people have to pay in so that the sick, infirm people at the top can take out. That's the way it's supposed to work. But what if the young, healthy people are not healthy? What if they're sick too? The entire bottom of the pyramid collapses. And that's what's happening to Social Security. And that's why Social Security will be broke by the year 2034. And I'm not the only one saying this. You don't trust me? Trust the banks. Because the only thing they're interested in is making money. This is from Morgan Stanley, okay, global investment bank, called The Bittersweet Aftertaste of Sugar, looking at economic growth in the United States 20 years into the future, based on a low sugar case here in blue, which we don't have, or a high sugar case here in gold, which we do have. And you'll notice that by 2035, economic growth will be at 0.0%. Now, who is that good for? That's not even good for the food industry. So basically, we're all eating ourselves into oblivion, economic oblivion, because of our processed food habit. And the thing is, we knew all this. We knew about all the disease stuff. We knew about the problems of sugar back in the 1960s. But the sugar industry covered it up. The first big fraud. And my colleagues at UCSF, Kristen Carnes, Laura Schmidt, Stan Glantz, found the paper trail that proved it. They published this in JAMA Internal Medicine, showing that the Sugar Association, here, the Sugar Research Foundation, sponsored its first coronary disease project in 1965. A literature review published in the New England Journal of Medicine, which singled out fat and cholesterol as a dietary cause of heart disease and downplayed evidence that sucrose consumption was also a risk factor. The Sugar Research Foundation set the review's objective, contributed articles for inclusion, and received drafts. The Sugar Research Foundation's funding and role was not disclosed. It's been a put-up job all along, from the beginning. They were protecting their turf at our expense. And for 40 years, we did eat less fat, eat fewer calories, exercise, and look where we are today. Well, that's what our kids are doing. They're eating less fat, they're eating less calories, and they're exercising. Except they're not. And they're getting sick. Because they're eating processed food, not real food. Now, another global investment bank, Credit Suisse, came out with a report on sugar back in 2013, sugar consumption at a crossroads. And here's what they said. We believe higher taxation on sugary food and drinks will be the best option to reduce sugar intake and help fund the fast and growing healthcare costs associated with type 2 diabetes and obesity. A global investment bank calling for taxation. Now, how screwed up is that? Well, in fact, we have it here in San Francisco, and in Oakland, and Alameda, and in Albany, and in Philadelphia, and one or two other places around the world, the UK. I'm actually going to London in 3 weeks to debate the UK sugar tax with the libertarians. Should be fun. Fact of the matter is, diabetes experts know, because they went to the International Diabetes Federation, went to the G20 back in Davos in 2015, and told them to tax sugar to save lives and money. And here are where sugar taxes are around the world today, because people know this is the problem. And we've shown this is how much money, how many lives we can save, prevalence change, fatty liver disease, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, overweight, and obesity. If we could do a 20% reduction, it would be like a tax, or a 50% reduction, which would be actually to conform to USDA guidelines on sugar consumption. And this is how much money we would save per year, $31.8 billion. So, remember our hypothesis at the beginning? Processed food is better than real food. So how do we do? Well, consumption, way up, no argument. Health and disease, total, complete, unmitigated disaster. In fact, if this had been a research study, the IRB would have closed it down decades ago because of all the deaths. Environment, you saw the soil erosion, the pesticides, the changes in climate, you saw all that. And finally, cash flow. For companies, previously good, not so good recently. For consumers, short-term gain for long-term pain. Yes, food costs less, but then health costs more. And finally, for society, 0.0% economic growth. Processed food is an experiment that failed. Period. There's only one answer, and that's real food. I published this in JAMA in 2017 with all the data I just showed you. There's only one answer. It's real food. The question is, can you do real food? How do you do real food? Can it be done? The answer is absolutely. You absolutely can. And I'll show you in a moment how. So, at UCSF, we have the Healthy Beverage Initiative. No sugar beverages on campus. If you've been to UCSF, to the hospital, you can't buy a sugar beverage in the cafeteria. It doesn't exist. They've all been taken out. And any vendors who sell on campus, they can't provide them.
What about
Diet soda's there. Yeah, I'm not happy about that, but diet soda's there. We had to make compromises, baby steps. We'll deal with diet soda, but first we had to deal with the elephant in the room. Sorry?
Are you guys separate from Stanford? You
Oh yeah, the merger did not work. That's why I have a job. I will also tell you that several other hospital systems have gotten rid of sugar beverages. Swedish Hospital in Seattle has gotten rid of juice. How about that? I think type 2 diabetes should be renamed. No one knows what it means anyway. It's an Egyptian word, it means siphon, because you're peeing your brains out. I think we should call it what it is, processed food disease. Oh, you've got processed food disease. You think that would make an impression on you? Proposal number 3, let's roll back the subsidies for the things that make us sick. There's no economist on the planet who believes in food subsidies. They distort the market. Let the market work. Why are we subsidizing things that poison us? In fact, if we did that, the only things that would actually go up are corn and sugar. Everything else would stay the same. And that's exactly what we want to go up. So I think this is a brilliant idea. And finally, what I'm going to talk to you about now, a trust mark. So I am the Chief Science Officer of a nonprofit. What we do is we praise the good in an attempt to get restaurants, cafeterias, hospitals, school districts, hint, hint, to procure, market, and sell real food in order to promote public health. So if you see this in a restaurant window, you say, oh, if I eat there, it won't kill me. And then the guy across the street says, hey, I'm losing market share to that guy. Maybe I ought to do the same. And we bring the whole thing up from the bottom up effect rather than top down. So UCSF is eReal certified, as you can see. I'm going to show you now, for applause, I'm going to show you a quick video that I think will be helpful to you, because we are fixing, we are fixing the Mount Diablo School District up in Contra Costa County. Can't do this from here. Let's see, will it run? I hope so.
Mount Diablo Unified is extremely excited to partner with Wellness in Action, Eat Real, as well as LifeLab.
We're super excited about this project within Mount Diablo because of the scope and scale of the district. Mount Diablo is the 3rd largest district in the Bay Area, and it covers 150 to 200 square miles, 8 different cities. We are reaching kids across a vast community.
Mount Diablo has also been partnering with LifeLab in order to align to state standards as well as the next generation science standards.
We have a certification system which includes some science-based health and nutrition standards. Our model is heavily science-based and science-backed. So that informs the standards and the certification process. And we're also leveraging that to take that science-based learning and inform the curriculum, the education, and the learning process as well.
We can't reach and transform our food world without starting with our children.
From seed to the family table, our students and our families embrace this new curriculum and focus on fabulous nutrition.
Having that be part of the whole vision that we're working on is incredibly important.
We have built out several outdoor education spaces where students spend time during their day growing their own food, preparing meals, and then trying them at home with their families. Recently, we've been partnering with Wellness in Action, who's helped us do a deeper dive in nutrition education at 2 of our Title I sites.
Wellness in Action has also been involved in bringing community partners to Mount Diablo School District. We've been able to work with 2 schools this past year to bring cooking and nutrition into the classroom. So we were able to offer parent culinary events where we actually had the parents come to the cafeteria after hours and teach them culinary skills. And the parents were so excited to see their own kids participating that they were learning as well. And so we're making that connection from the cafeteria all the way back into the home.
We're extremely excited to take a look at our cafeterias in a different way and really change them into more education spaces where our food service workers are going to be educators as well as our classroom teachers.
We firmly believe in edible education through school gardens, cafeterias and outdoor classrooms, and inside the classroom through nutrition education as well as a culinary program. Here in Contra Costa County, 1 out of 6 people are food insecure. So sometimes the only way for us to address food insecurity is through the school district school food service program.
We started as an after-school program, after-school green team. What they have learned from first grade to third grade is astounding. They can actually pronounce these words, and that they actually know that their food does come from the garden. Today we're talking about nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and then they're going to have a snack that's high in all 3 of those things.
I get to learn about plants a lot. Right now we are looking at the plants and seeing if they are healthy or not, and seeing what they need so they can be healthy. We learn what are the nutrients in the plants. The garden lessons are pretty fun, and we get to write things that are really interesting.
Because, I mean, we planted it ourselves. We did all of this. That was behind us, we did that.
I like the color, and I also like planting because I like to eat.
And it's very nutritious and it's fresh and we know where it comes from. We created this with our hands.
And since we created it and seeing that they pick vegetables and we cook it and everybody eats it and enjoys it, it's interesting. We actually did that. We helped the students here.
It really shows how we can come together and, make a project and continue with it.
Every single day in the kitchen, we have at least vegetables from the garden.
Eat better, it helps us perform better, sleep better, and it's just like a chain effect. And we can share this information with our family, friends, and everybody can just be a part of it.
Where I wouldn't usually exercise, and now I feel better and I actually want to exercise.
I want to garden and plant more.
Helps me perform better as an athlete because I'm actually getting what I'm supposed to be eating.
We were, those girls that would just want to, gossip and feel like dirt is not our thing, but just put on some dirty shoes and you're good.
So this was prepared for a grant application process up in San Francisco, and we won one of the grants. And so we are in the process right now of turning the entire Mount Diablo School District, every single school in the district, 27 schools, will be real certified by the end of next year. And we have incorporated a 4th grade curriculum where they teach. It's not, that's somebody else. Yes, it's
My name is David Gerson, Executive Director of Loaves and Fishes of Contra Costa. It's one of the thoughts I had.
Where we are teaching the 4th graders to cook in the cafeteria. The food service workers are trained on the front end and actually teach the kids the curriculum 3 times a week. They're actually making the food. Because what we've learned is there's education and there's implementation, and they're not the same. There are a lot of school districts that have done gardens. I'm not arguing that. You probably are doing it down here too. But going from gardening to fixing the food at home is a huge leap. And the reason is because once you've gardened it, that doesn't mean you know how to cook it. So the goal here is to, and you're not going to teach the parents, but the goal here is to teach the 4th graders because they have the knife skills. They can do the culinary skills. That's the youngest we can get to them, where they can actually handle a knife in a kitchen. And teach them how to cook, how to prepare an artichoke, so that when they go into Safeway, the parent goes, well, I'm not going to buy that. No, I know how to make that. I'll do that. And you now have a positive disruptive force in every kitchen, fixing the food at home, because you've taught the kid. We will not fix this until we teach the kids, because the kids are the positive disruptive force. And teaching them gardening is not teaching them knife skills. We're teaching them how to cook. We're teaching them how to cook. We're doing it for them. We can do it for you, if you want. I'm here to basically, hopefully, get that through to you. You can do this if you want. I want to thank Sunita and David and Reynold for inviting me tonight. You know, this is a huge problem for all of us. I'm trying to solve it any way I can. But the one thing I've learned is that cultural tectonic shifts can be done. They take a while. There have been 4 cultural tectonic shifts in the last 30 years. 4. Bicycle helmets and seatbelts, smoking in public places, drunk driving, condoms in bathrooms. 30 years ago, if a legislator stood up in a state house or Congress to advocate for any one of those 4, they'd been laughed right out of town. Today, they're all facts of life. No one's yelling nanny state. No one's yelling liberty interest to smoke. Okay? All those things went from fashion to filthy habit. How come? And how come it took 30 years? The answer, we taught the children. When the children got old enough, they got to vote. And the old people, who are the naysayers, they're dead. That's why it takes a generation. But you have to start somewhere. So you have to teach the kids first. So that's what we want to do. That's what I'm here for. I'm a pediatrician. That's my job.
Yeah. So my concern is maybe okay, 30 you showed us so many charts.
Sorry?
Oh, you showed us so many charts, like the graphs and the information. You know, 1980s, 70s, life used to be way slower pace. People used to have more time.
Yeah.
Now there's an accelerated pace, and I don't have time to really. So I think that's the main reason. I mean, besides being lobbies and all these food companies making money, but I think that's the main reason that. Because and my question is, what do you usually eat? Because I try to.
We cook every night. I didn't used to. I used to eat out 2-3 times a week because, you know, I was working, my wife was working, you know, I'd get home too tired to do this, you know. So I understand. I used to do that too. The fact of the matter is, it does not have to take long if you know what you're doing. Now, if you don't know what you're doing, then it can take forever. But if you know what you're doing, it can actually be very quick. Cindy Gershon, who is the chef on my book, Fat Chance Cookbook, it's all real food. We prepared a 6-course dinner from that cookbook in 30 minutes. 2 people working 6 courses, 30 minutes. Basically, if you have 30 minutes, you can make anything.
But you have to do the grocery shopping before you cook it.
Yes, well, but you can do the grocery shopping in bulk, and you can freeze things, and you can, there are lots of things you can do to make that work, if you know what you're doing. In fact, there are helpful hints throughout the cookbook, which I'm not here to sell, but it is true. All the things you say about the issue of convenience and the issue of time and the issue of having to go to the grocery store. Well, you know what? Now we got Amazon Fresh. They'll show up at your door. Okay? You got Blue Apron. They'll show up. It'll show up. I mean, huh? I'm not promoting any of these per se. What I'm saying is that if the issue is convenience and time, there are ways around it. Yeah. Well, let's have some.
But you didn't answer my question.
I didn't.
So do you mind telling us your favorite 2 things that you cook? So.
Oh, okay, sure. I make chicken piccata, very quick. Okay, chicken with lemon and white wine. Huh?
You boil it?
No, saute it. So olive oil, throw the chicken in the pan. Sometimes bread with flour, sometimes not. Lemon juice, capers, a little white wine, and gourmet meal. 10 minutes. Chili. I cut up some stew meat, okay, throw it in the pot, brown it, onions, red beans, garlic, some cilantro, can of tomatoes, done. Pardon?
What about the vegetables? My big thing is the vegetables.
So
We don't need enough vegetables.
we don't eat enough vegetables. So my kids go crazy for Brussels sprouts with bacon. They think that is like ambrosia of the gods. Okay? I mean, now, straight Brussels sprouts, they always think they're too bitter. Okay? So you brown the bacon, and you do the Brussels sprouts in the bacon fat? Okay, all right. Sauteed green beans, steamed broccoli. I mean, it does not have to take long.
I want to ask you a question.
But it's a
about-
whole lot healthier.
No, I know. Any difference between cooked vegetables, raw vegetables, and this is a different one, FODMAP?
Oh, FODMAP, yeah.
Yeah,
I know
I
all
would
about
like
FODMAP.
to go talk about, just a little bit about that, because that's also real food.
Yeah,
but
sure. FODMAP is, low FODMAP foods are real foods. They have fewer fermentable carbohydrates. Now, I will tell you, I had intestinal dysbiosis myself for 4 years. Did not know it means I was having a lot of GI problems. And I had a lot of gas. My bowels were not happy. And I'm a doctor, and I went to the gastroenterologist 3 separate times to get worked up. And each time he worked me up, he never did a small bowel biopsy. I wanted him to, but he said, you don't need it. He said, your antibodies are negative, you don't have celiac, just eat real food. So I kept eating real food, and I kept getting sick. Myself and I. I didn't know what was going on, and I was not very happy. I was going to the bathroom like 8 times a day. Probably too much information. But I was a keynote speaker at a pediatrics conference. There were 2 keynotes. It was me and the head of Pete's GI from U of Chicago. And he was one of the world's celiac experts. So his talk was really interesting. He spent 30 minutes talking about celiac. He spent another 30 minutes talking about this other thing, which we call non-celiac gluten sensitivity. The reason why everyone's gluten-free now. And he said it's not gluten, because everyone's got negative antibodies, like me. He said what they finally figured out is it's not gluten, it's wheat. It's wheat. Wheat is a very different organism. It's hexaploid, and there are 700 different antigens, as opposed to, say, barley or rye, which also have gluten. So if you take white cells from people with this problem, non-celiac gluten sensitivity, like me, and you put them in a dish, and you throw wheat on it, they go bonkers. If you throw barley or rye on them, they don't do anything, they sit there. So there's some other allergen in the wheat, not gluten, something else. So he wants to rename it non-celiac wheat intolerance. So I went off wheat. I've been off wheat since September, so it's now 6 months. My bowels have gone completely back to normal. Now the thing was, that's what my doctor told me to do, was use a low FODMAP diet. That's what he told me to do, and it didn't work. It didn't work until I actually got rid of wheat from my diet. And the thing is, of course, wheat's in so many things. Especially processed food. Right. But I was having like like country store bread, which is still got gluten. So once I got rid of it, my bowels went back to normal. And I had to look back. So the FODMAP thing, I think, is actually not real. I think it's not necessary, but I don't know that yet. So
maybe we can do one more question, and then if there is any commentary on the...
You had 2 other questions I can talk to you.
Cooked vegetables.
Oh, cooked versus raw. Okay, so if you boil them, you will inactivate some of the micronutrients and some of the vitamins. But you can saute them, or you can just microwave them briefly to, just make them a little more tender, and they'll be fine. Okay, so if you overcook them, yes, they will lose some of their micronutrients. So that's why they always say raw, but you can cook them, just not severely.
What do you think the biggest barriers are to having a big change to your food?
Oh, price.
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 Not,
Especially in the school district.
or just, let's say, in society, in the community place?
I think it's price. Because everyone is now used to cheap food. And they can't imagine having to spend more on it.
Yeah, but people don't like being sick.
Well, I know. So the thing is, they don't know that their food is making them sick. They don't understand, they haven't yoked those two things together. Because they don't understand what it is that's making them sick. They thought it was the calories. They thought it was something they could control. But if they're eating processed food, it has nothing to do with the calories. It has to do with the food itself. So when they learn that and they yoke those two things together, then they can change. Which is my job, is to yoke them together, to explain that like I did tonight. Yep.
Maybe one more question and then you can.
What is your take on the epidemic of allergies that happen? I mean, when I was growing up, I hardly ever heard. And now
Right. Everyone's got peanut allergy, this allergy, that allergy. Absolutely. No. Really good question, and everyone wants to know. And I can't tell you for sure, but I can tell you the latest hypothesis has to do with this leaky gut issue. So, you have 100 trillion bacteria in your intestine. They stay in your intestine. They don't leak out. If they leaked out, they go into your bloodstream. Or they would make cytokines or endotoxins or lipopolysaccharides, bad proteins or bad lipids that would get across the leak into your bloodstream and cause inflammation. Processed food causes inflammation. Fructose causes inflammation, and you can actually knock down the endotoxin level in the blood by giving antibiotics.
And how do you define inflammation?
Sorry?
How do you define inflammation?
Inflammation means that the white cells have been activated, basically. And you can find signs of chemical inflammation in the blood, like cytokine levels, like TNF-alpha, IL-6, CRP, etc. Point is, processed food, because of all those things, like high sugar, emulsifiers in particular, lack of fiber, lead to that leaky gut state. Work from Bruce Ames over at Children's Oakland Research Institute. He has been working on this for 20 years now, and it has shown that things in the food change gut permeability and allow for these things to get across. Once a protein gets across into the bloodstream, then the immune cells can mount a response to it, and now you've got an allergy. So those are things that should never have gotten across. But now, because of our processed food environment, do get across, and then trigger the immune system to go haywire. And that's why, this allergy thing has gone through the roof. Again, it's the processed food. So the processed food is a problem at every level. The only thing, it's at every level except price. That's the only thing it works at, the only level it works at. Every other level, it's a disaster. Probably, yeah. Probably for the same thing. No. It's from the mom feeding the kid the wrong stuff. Because the mom fed the kid baby food. What's in the baby food? Baby food's toxic. You should make your own. There are actually companies now making their, like real baby food.
So Dr. Lustig, thank you so much. We will close up with that raffle. I did want to just reorient the conversation to, I'm hoping that what we can take away from this is for our school district, a push for real food. Using a certifying agency would be a great way to get that conversation started. We'd love to make an introduction to the school district and take it a step further from here. One thing that I did want to pose to this audience as well as to you is the connection between anxiety, depression, some of the things that we are seeing in our school district and the processed food, and how we can make a case for real food based on some of those, what's our reality in this town.
So you notice I wrote 2 books for the public. One was called Fat Chance, which is about diet and physical health. The other one was called The Hacking of the American Mind, which is about diet and behavioral health. It's about addiction and depression. And it turns out processed food plays a role in both of those as well, because it's actually changing, because of the nature of it, it's changing neurotransmitter levels in the brain. And I don't have time to go into the whole, why that is, the whole 9 yards. It's all in the book. If you want, there is a YouTube video, 30 minutes long. If you put in the title of the book, The Hacking of the American Mind, or my name, it'll come up. So I did when the book first came out, and it will explain all of it to you. Without question, sugar is a gateway drug. And if you don't believe me, can I show one 20-second clip? I have to find it.
Yes.
If you don't believe me, let me show you one 20-second clip that will
While you look for that, maybe
stay with you forever.
do you want to do the wrap while Dr. Lustig?
I just want to say one thing.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Dave Shen. I don't know if I got introduced, whatever. Anyway, I'm Sumita's counterpart at PTAC Health and Wellness. And one of the things that we're hoping we'll have today, if you even believe in just one or two of those slides that Dr. Lustig presented today, we'd love to have your help, because we're starting an advocacy movement towards real food on campus. And it spans the gamut of things like, potentially more organic food, potentially more local source food, even touching on sustainability things. We want to get food from sustainably farmed operations. We're looking at gardens and bringing those into the education system. We're actually looking at nutritional education, which is pretty much non-existent here at PAUSD right now, and it shouldn't be like that. And we do touch on it a little bit in the secondaries, but it should be really done at the elementaries, where we can catch kids early, because by the time they reach that age, they're ready, they're set in their ways, right? We should do it earlier. So we're going to be reaching out to you, and hopefully we can enlist some of you to help with this effort.
And for Meadow Elementary School, they've had a garden for quite a few years.
Most of the elementary schools, I think it's taking it to the next step. Cooking from that garden would be a great.
Gardens are great, but they're not enough. Necessary, but not sufficient.
In fact, we're also advocating for kitchen facilities across the district. So that's
a lot of work to be done. We need support for.
Yeah, and that's a 10-year project.
Subject.
So let me play my 20-second clip for you. You'll love it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I promise.
You can get through a day without doing something to alter my consciousness.
And it started with heroin.
It started with sugar. Sugar? Oh yeah, when I was 5, 6 years old, I was cramming sugar down my throat as fast as I could get it down. Sweets, sugar on bread and butter. I became addicted to sugar because it changed the way I felt.
So if you don't think that sugar is a gateway drug,
Okay, let's close with a raffle. Okay, that's why you all stayed to the end, I know, right? Dr. Lustig, would you do the honors? All right, let's see. The first book is The Obesity Code by Jason Fung. Nice.
That is, I think, the last 3 numbers is all you need.
Yeah, last 3 numbers.
086.
no one? Oh, man. No one.
096.
No?
You sure did.
Not birthday.
I don't think that many people left.
078.
Are you kidding me?
We have the
There we go. 078?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you. So,
He's a colleague up in Toronto.
yes, and it's a long history between Dr. Lustig and Reynolds, and thanks to their friendship, we have Dr. Lustig.
He's my class secretary from MIT.
That's
How about
funny.
that?
Okay, Unsavory Truth by Mary Nestle. How
Nestle.
companies use
Nestle.
signs of what we
Nestle.
Nestle.
excuse me.
No relation to the food.
No.
089.
Seems like they're all.
Sorry, what's the
Oh,
title?
There you
all
go.
right.
Okay.
Unsavory Truth.
This is the conflicts of interest in the food industry.
Great book. Check it out.
And go ahead and
All right, Gary Clouds, Case Against Sugar.
I think you got this one, 093, you said?
There you go. Okay, another one by Mary Nesson, Food Politics.
All right.
More about how the food industry influences nutrition and health.
091.
Hey, all right.
Yeah, that's
The S.L. family, definitely. I think Dr. Lustig took this one up. Nina Tichol's Big Fat Surprise, which is covering a lot of what you talked about with the sugar industry.
She just gave a talk at the Cato Institute like 4 days ago about what was going on. What were going
095. Yeah. Oh my God. Sounds like these.
This is the book that basically has all the data that shows that exonerates saturated fat is not the bad guy.
Eat more meat.
All right, Dr. Lustig's book, Fat Chance.
083. You got it.
Hey, all right.
You better read it now.
I'm hoping that we have a student amongst us who may start a cooking club at PAN.
Yeah, that'd be
That's what I
great.
wanted to say, if we can get the kids involved, my husband's kind of play to
Yep, that's in our plans. Yep.
We would like you to spearhead some student involvement.
Hey, the hacking of the American mind.
That's
That was my doctor.
one of the diet and behavioral.
That's 084.
Yes.
All right.
Cool. Thanks again for coming.
Oh, sure. Yeah, 2016. Yes, October 24th. So, the interview class works. You know why? Because it does, but why? No. It's burning the liver fat. The liver is
Are you working on it? Okay. Because I'm doing tasting we get paid. How else do I thought maybe.
So I understand why.
No, it's all parent driven. So you just go in, usually third, fourth, fifth grade, fourth, fifth grade, the chefs, third grade, that's your parent-led activity if you want to do.
Yeah, I know. Change your culture. Change your culture.
Cool, nice to meet you. Yeah. Dave. Cool. Okay, good.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Last 2 months, way too busy. Tag. And then trying to switch into a nutrition coach kind of job. And then my kids and all that stuff on top of that. So I'm really scared.
Yes.
Haven't fully decided yet. I may just throw it in there, like never go to a exec meeting because they go like so many hours a month. But I want to stay open to push this issue that I have. And that's important to me, but I may do it outside of the team. This is a bunch of and then my whole thing was I wanted to the stuff that I tripped over and learned along the way, figure out how to like advocate for this stuff, figure out so that
but it was.
And once you get into the science and stuff like in there, then you're like, oh my god.
Thank you for organizing.
Yeah, you bet. Good to see you.
For the book.
It's a good read. You'll like
Isn't
it.
that happening with you?
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
really good.
Science.
I know.
Well, we just put it so sweet, like Jamba juice.
Anything that has sugar,
water.
added sugar.
Yeah, we'll talk. Yeah, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming.
Absolutely. We're counting on your son.
I have to save the world.
Yes.
Turn this off.